Notice I was muted, guys. Sorry about that. Welcome to today's Cathedra webinar. We are coming to you live on May 1st, 2025. If anybody in the room is an NLC webinar first timer today, know that our Cathedra webinars get their name from the Greek word for learning. And today you're going to be learning about increasing grant revenue, focusing on improving funder relationships from your instructor, Diane Leonard, who is president of DH Leonard Grant Writing Services. And you actually get a second instructor today, Beth Archer. My name is Brooke Warrington. I'm the Training and Development Specialist here at the Native Learning Center. We're also excited that you could tune in for today's webinar. Just a quick disclaimer, if you could follow along while I read this out loud. This webinar provides a summary of fundamental concepts, requirements, and/or procedures within the allotted 90 minutes. The material discussed does not illustrate all possible scenarios that could be applicable. And then just a friendly reminder, the webinar materials are protected by copyright, trademark, trade secret, and other intellectual property laws. If you are new to the system, know that you'll be able to access the recording of today's webinar, as well as webinar resources, slides, including any of the webinars that we've done in the past, and any moving forward. You can find all of that stuff in the courses section. So if you end up sharing that resource with a friend or a colleague, that is where you can point them to. And then anytime you join a webinar in the future, remember we're on this new system. You will not have to register for each individual webinar. Now that you're a member of the learning platform, you'll just log in whenever you know a webinar that you want to tune into is happening. You'll click on that green banner at the top of your screen and you will be in. We do ask that you you join with listen-only capabilities just because it helps to cut down on audio feedback. And if you join and you find that your sound isn't coming out of the right device, maybe you have a Bluetooth speaker, maybe you're trying to use your headphones, a way that you can switch that is by clicking on that telephone icon at the bottom of the screen. That'll bring up a list of your mic and your speaker devices, and you can select the correct audio output. We do have different ways to interact during today's webinar, but we will primarily rely on the public chat feature. So if you don't yet have yours open, you can go over to this messages panel and click here to open up the public chat. And then we do want to encourage class participation. So, ask those questions, make those comments. If you are having any kind of tech support issues that I can help navigate through, you can send that as well. You'll just come down here to where it says send message to public chat, click on there, type what you'd like to say or ask, and then you can hit enter, or you can click on that little paper airplane icon and that'll send it in where we can see it. We do also have a list of helpful links in the shared notes section. I have already taken the liberty of sending you guys the presentation slides link, as well as the resource item, the Grantmaker Relationship Guide link, into the public chat already, but there are other links in that shared notes section. And if you ask something or you have a tech problem that you've sent into the chat and you feel like maybe we missed you, you could go ahead and use that hand raise feature to draw our attention to it. We do want to kind of get the chat box going. It's fun to see where everyone is from. So if you don't mind taking a moment, please, you can introduce yourself in the public chat. Let us know what your name is, where you're tuning in from. We can see all the different tribal nations represented, your work or your role in Indian country that probably led you to today's webinar, and your tribal affiliation if you have one. You might be a tribal employee who doesn't have one. That's okay too. And then just a quick final note before I hand it over to Beth. Try to avoid clicking on that red menu panel that's all the way to the left-hand side of your screen. Whatever you click on the menu panel, it's going to pull you out and take you to what you've clicked. Not to fear, you can always just click on that green banner at the top of the screen to rejoin, but I just want to give you a heads up so you're not pulled out and wondering what happened. All right, folks, it is with great pleasure that I introduce your webinar instructors, Diane Leonard and Beth Archer. And Beth, I am going to hand it off to you now. You are now presenter.
Great. Thanks so much, Brooke. And can you hear me all right? I was having a little bit of trouble with my headset.
Oh, yeah, we can hear you great.
Okay, great. Awesome. All right. So hi, everyone. I'm so excited to be here with you today. I'll be starting off this session this afternoon, and we'll welcome my colleague, Diane Leonard, a little later on. And we're so grateful that you chose to spend some time with us. Love seeing people start to participate in the chat. Please continue to check in. It's always fun to see where people are coming from today. And we're looking forward to discussing today's topic, increasing grant revenue with a focus on improving funder relationships. So as I mentioned, my colleague Diane will be jumping on here shortly to take over a little bit of this webinar. Diane is a certified grant professional. As Brooke mentioned, she is the president of Diane H of DH Leonard Consulting. She's a registered Scrum trainer. She began her career as a grant maker, which provides a really unique and great perspective to now be the one that's writing grants. She spent a lot of time being the one that was reading grants. As I said, you'll get to know her a little bit better later. But she has some great insight into this world, a lot of experience to put behind everything we're going to talk about today. I am Beth Archer. I use she, her pronouns. I've been working in the nonprofit space for just over 10 years, in grants specifically for the past 7. And in that time have been involved in several different roles. Similar to Diane, I did not start in the grant seeking side of things. I actually did a lot in operations before I moved into development and fundraising. And along with being a grant professional and a consultant, I'm currently also the executive director of a Pennsylvania nonprofit. So I've been on a couple sides of this relationship building, especially with grant makers, and have worked with a variety of different teams doing so. Happy to be here today, put all of that different experience behind the topic, and hopefully help you leave with some really practical tools to strengthen grant seeking and specifically building grant maker relationships within your own organizations. All right, so here is what we are going to cover today. We're going to start by talking about increasing the confidence and the willingness of your team members to participate in stewardship and grant maker relationships. We are going to move on to specifically talking about engaging board members in this process. And we're going to look at what your organization might already be doing in terms of stewardship methodologies that you can use to better engage, more consistently engage, or start engaging with grant makers. And then we're going to have a little bit of time at the end also for questions and answers. We hope that you use the public chat as much or as little as you need and want. We like to have some engagement in there. If that's not serving you today and how you're planning to participate in this webinar, please do not feel any pressure to use the chat box. I'm going to do my best to keep an eye on it as we go. But again, as Brooke mentioned, if you feel like we've missed something or you have a question that hasn't been answered, please continue to pester or make sure you ask at the end. We want to make sure that you are all getting as much out of today's session as possible. So back to the chat box. Keeping us in there. We've introduced ourselves a little bit. I would also love to hear, it's the 1st of May. It's finally, at least here in Northeastern Pennsylvania, feeling like it is mid-spring. So if you feel comfortable, go ahead and put in what you are most excited about this month. I personally am very excited about getting my gardens started. Mid-May is when that happens in this part of the country. And I usually handle the flower garden. My spouse handles the vegetable garden, and we're just starting to get all of those pieces ready. And I'm excited to get it out there, have everything turn green, and not look so dead and brown. So that is where I am excited for this month. I see that I have some people who agree with me, just looking for some warmer weather. All right. As you continue to add your thoughts in there, let's look at what our goal for our time together is today. Oh, Celeste, I'm right with you. Ready for the flowers. It's starting. We're getting there. It's going to continue. So today our main purpose is to understand the importance of an organization's relationships with its grantors, with its funders. Spoiler alert, relationships are a very important part of both securing and maintaining grants. And in a lot of cases, they're an important part of growing funding from the same funders, from connecting to other funders. It's just an important part of this grant process. And it's also an often overlooked piece. It isn't always easy. It can be really difficult to build relationships with our funders. It can feel uncomfortable at times, reaching out, knowing how or when or why to build the relationship, but it is that crucial piece. Ultimately, grant-making organizations are led by people. It's easy to see funders as an entity, especially when a lot of interactions and grants can feel very transactional. You don't always get to see a face that you can associate with a foundation. So it's easy to forget that that face is there. But at the end of the day, funding relationships are people granting to people. There is a person or people on both sides of this relationship, and it's important to remember that. We also want to remember that relationships are a best practice. They are one of the 5 R's that you see here. So it's a best practice within the grant profession. It's not just me saying, I think relationships are an important part. Sometimes you will see this grant life cycle as a list. I like this visual of it as a cycle because these are really things that are continuously happening in your organization as you prepare and submit grants. It is likely already happening, some of these pieces in your organization, whether you are looking at grants for the very first time, or you've been applying to grants for the past 15 years, 30 years. This cycle is happening and it's continuous. You don't start, decide that you're ready to get a grant and never have to revisit that conversation. You don't research funders one time and never have to go back with different funders and do some of that prospect research. And that's the same for every piece of this, including the relationships. And that's where we're going to be working today. So just to situate us and what we will be discussing, assume in this hypothetical situation, whether you are actually here or not, keep working on those pieces. But we are going to assume that you've determined grant readiness within your organization. If we're talking about building relationships, we know that we are ready to do some grant seeking. We also are not going to talk about the research piece of that today. So we're thinking, we've looked out there, we know there is at least one foundation, maybe several, at least one opportunity that would be a good fit for our mission and one that we would like to approach. Again, no pressure if you do not have all of those pieces in place, but just to show you where you would want to be to start talking about relationships. And here are some things to keep in mind as we are talking about this. The first point here, if there is anything you remember from today's session, it's don't treat your grant makers like an ATM. I personally am very passionate about this piece here. I really believe that you should be looking at grants as funding partnerships. As you build your relationship building muscles, there's going to be a wide spectrum of interactions that you will have. Every grant maker is going to be different because every funder is participating in relationships based on their own capacity and their own preference. But you are in this together. They have a resource, in this case, funding, but not always. Sometimes it's also capacity building, technical support, connections, but they have a resource that they want to use to support their mission, and they can provide that resource to your organization so that you can use your own resources and provide the services that are going to make the change that you are both looking for. And because this is a relationship, we get to these second pieces here. We're going to steward these relationships. It's important to express gratitude and express next level gratitude, which we'll talk about a little bit later on. And we're going to stay in communication with our grant makers. We're not treating them like an ATM. We didn't just go get the money out and then walk away. We do tend to write proposals in a bit of a vacuum. You can really only write based on what is going on in your organization currently. But we all know that that's not how it stays or how it happens. The real life implementation of programming is constantly changing. Things change every day. Staffing changes. Maybe somebody who is fully supported by a grant is now no longer with the organization. And if we're treating this arrangement with our funders as a relationship, our funders can help us, they can support us, or at the very least, they should know that some of these changes are happening. They know it does, and it can really go a long way in your relationships, in future funding opportunities for you to stay in communication with your funders. Don't let them be surprised that the project is very different than what you applied for. And the only way they find that out is because you've submitted your grant report and you've told them otherwise. If we are treating our relationships like this, if we're remembering these key things, we're going to make a big difference in the grant seeking within our own organizations. But let's talk about how this really could be and should be a team sport. And we're going to move into ways that you can increase confidence and the willingness of your team members to steward your grant makers. As part of our research, something that we should be looking into when we see potential funders, no matter what kind they are, corporations, foundations, government agencies, we should consider their capacity and their preference for outreach. I mentioned earlier that building relationships with grant makers can sometimes be very difficult. And it's often because we have all come across funders who don't want to talk to you or can't talk to you. But it is truly different for each funder, and we need to know that information about them. But we also need to be realistic about our own capacity and our organization's capacity. I'm sure many of you are wearing many hats and have a lot to focus on each day. And the idea of adding more to your plate in regards to funder engagement and stewardship might not seem feasible. But building and maintaining funder relationships is a crucial part of grants. So we are going to have to find some ways to make sure that this very important thing doesn't fall to just one person. It really shouldn't fall to just one person. I know there are probably many of you, myself included at times, who have either been a grant team of one or have at least felt like a grant team of one, or maybe the grant team superhero. I know I have felt this way. I know many of my colleagues have felt this way. And so if that is the situation that you are in right now, the idea of engaging a grant team might make you chuckle a little bit. Like, oh, yes, let me gather me, myself, and I, and we'll game plan who's going to be involved in funder relationships. Trust me, I have been there. I'm very fortunate now to be part of a team of grant writers, but I've been there. And in where I'm the director for, I'm there now. So I understand this situation and this feeling, but I'm going to challenge you to look at who could and really should be part of your grant team. It really does not need to be the person that is writing the grant. For some organizations that we work with, it's the assistant director who does outreach, or the executive director. Maybe it's program staff or development staff. We even have a few whose board members do outreach for them. I know that that's the dream, and we are going to talk about how to engage our board members in relationship building and stewardship in a little while. But the point is that the grant team can include a lot of different people. And really, it doesn't matter what their job title is. It matters who's comfortable talking about it. It matters who's willing to talk about it. And those are really important pieces. You want to make sure that if somebody is interacting with potential donors, with current donors, that they have a strong understanding of what your organization does, or a specific project does that you are looking to support with the funding. When we think about the example of it could be someone else on the team, I mentioned at the beginning that I'm the executive director of a nonprofit, and our board is wonderful. They all believe very strongly in our mission, but at the end of the day, some are more engaged than others. And if we're trying to talk to a funder about specifics of one of our programs, they might not know all of the specifics, and that could fall into whether it's staff or a board member or a volunteer. The bottom line is there aren't often a lot of people who know every single thing about the organization. And in a minute, we're going to talk about how we can make them feel that way, how we can make them comfortable and make sure that they know. And it's really important too to know exactly why you're reaching out to someone. If it is because your director of development has a connection with this funder, maybe their outreach isn't really too much about project specifics yet. Maybe it's just providing an introduction. And again, we're going to talk about how we can make them comfortable no matter what the point of the outreach is. And you want to make sure once you decide who is involved in this team that you are having a conversation and agreeing on how outreach and relationship building should be happening within your organization. We often hear, whether we say it to ourselves or someone external is saying it to us, that grants might not be everyone else's priority. If you are the grant writer, if you are involved in the development or the fundraising, or you are responsible for the funding for your program, it is your job. Everyone has other things to worry about as well. And true that it might be one of your key responsibilities, but this really needs to be a piece of grant seeking within your organization that is supported by the larger team, because there are so many different things that play into it. And it really is such an important piece. You have to make sure that the right people are talking about the right things. And so you'll be a lot more successful with outreach and with your grant seeking overall if you make sure that your organization is prioritizing relationships, and not just individual donor relationships, but grant maker relationships as well. So how do we do this? How do we engage other members of our team and make them feel comfortable talking with grant makers? So something that we like to provide to clients as part of our research, and something that is included in today's free handout, is what we call our FRQ, or our Foundation Relationship Questionnaire. I'm certain that every organization does this a little bit differently. Maybe it's not something you have considered before. Maybe it's something you would like to do more of. But this is a really simple way to make sure that your team, your grant team, knows who you are looking at, what opportunities you're considering. And this way you can pretty simply compile who are on the board of directors, who's on the foundation staff for these opportunities, and see if anyone has a connection. The way that we will typically do this is share a group of these FRQs all at once. I've heard it, again, done in different ways. Sometimes it's more of an informal conversation where the grant writer, whoever on your staff is doing this research, says to maybe the whole staff, maybe just the development staff, maybe just to the executive director, do you know anybody who works at XYZ Foundation? They may not. It's unlikely without seeing the list that unless it's a very close connection, they know whether one exists or not. So you can take all of these FRQs for all of the opportunities that you are currently looking at and send it to the executive director, send it to the director of development. Here are some foundations we've researched, we've determined they're a strong fit, or we really have some questions, we think they might be a fit. Here's who's on their board, here's who's on their staff. Does anybody know anyone? It should then just take a few minutes for them to glance through the packet, and you might find an awesome connection. even if it's a couple degrees, like 6 degrees of Kevin Bacon here, there might be a connection that you can leverage that could make a difference in the grant application that you're going to submit. Of course, it does not always happen like this, but I am here to say that it certainly can, and probably would more often than you think if this isn't something that your organization is already doing. This next point here, I would really love to hear from you all if this is something that you are already doing. Does your organization have talking points? I'm calling it talking points. Maybe you call it an elevator pitch. Maybe you call it a one-pager. Does your organization have something like this, a base of what the organization does, what you're about, maybe what your goals are, but at the very least, here's our organization and here's what we do. Do you already have something like this? I see a few people adding in some thoughts here. And I have, again, been part of some different teams. This has looked very different in a lot of different places. I've had some where it's been very clear that when we talk to anyone external, this is what you say. I've been a part of others where there isn't anything and everyone is just kind of talking about the organization as they understand it. I see that maybe it's just something that's created when there are new funders. So maybe it's something you haven't considered yet or you haven't done. I would, without really knowing much about your role in your organization, Celeste, I would say that there is a chance that another team might have something like this or something similar. Maybe it's not what they use to talk to funders, but do you have some base information that you always put in like media and outreach or something like that? I see that Carmen does have some talking points to create a consistent message. Yes, I mentioned earlier at PA Eats, if I just left our board members on their own to talk, they'd have great things to say about the organization, but I couldn't guarantee it was consistent unless we were providing them with some kind of talking points. Well, this is something that I do feel is very key to engaging our team in building relationships. It's going to make you feel more comfortable as well. But if we're thinking about the larger team, that list of people who maybe are not the ones that are writing the grants, talking points can go a long way in making them feel comfortable and making them willing to do part of this relationship building and stewardship. We do this, again, this along with the relationship questionnaire. This is something that we often provide to our clients when we are doing research on new opportunities, or sometimes it's existing opportunities and they want the executive director to talk to them this time and talk about expanding their funding relationship or something similar to that. But we do recommend that when you are preparing talking points, we're going to talk a little bit more about this. I'm going to show you a template that you can use as well. But just to kind of get the basics of our talking points here, prepare them for an in-person interaction. That may not be how it ends up happening, but then you can translate it from that in-person interaction into something that can be used over the phone, or you can translate it into an email more easily instead of taking an email and then trying to make that something that you can say to someone over the phone. That doesn't just sound like a script. So here are a few things that we think make for very strong talking points. The first is a brief introduction of who you are and what agency you are with. And I say brief because you likely don't have a lot of time. No matter how you are interacting with the funder, have you called them and you have them on the phone? Are you at a community event? Is your executive director at a community event and they are face-to-face with the person and they get to speak directly to them? Even if you're just sending it over an email, I'm sure all of us can relate to having a lot of emails and kind of getting lost if the email is too long. So we want it to be brief. You have a lot of time in other opportunities to maybe to provide your full story. What was your organization's history? What's the story behind how it was founded? This is all information that is important, but right now when you have just a little bit of time, it might not be the most important for them to know. You want them to leave this conversation, no matter the medium that you're having it in, remembering something about your organization. Saying that you're a 501c3 that was founded in 1994 isn't something that they need to know right now. It's not going to be the most impactful, and it's going to take up some precious time that maybe you have to really leave an impact. Of course, if you want to keep things in mind, like if it is not a local funder, make sure they know where you are located and that you are within their geographical scope. Make sure that they remember who you are, your name and your title and all of that. But keep this piece brief. You will have lots of time to introduce more about you and more about your organization. That's not the point of this conversation at the moment. And then the next piece is why you think your organization is a good match. Often when we are in conversations like this, again, over the phone, in person, however we're interacting, our first thought is to ask them, do you think that we are a good fit? And that puts a lot on them. It requires that they are understanding your program, and maybe they have never even heard of you before. So don't ask them why, or if they think that you have a strong potential as a funding partner. Tell them why you believe, based on what you researched about them, why you believe that you are a good fit. Do your missions align? Do they fund programs that are just like the program that you wanted to talk to them about today? Use this as your opportunity to connect exactly what you do to exactly what the funder wants to fund. Sometimes this is difficult if you cannot find a lot of publicly available information on a funder, but to the best of your ability through your research, make sure you tell them why you think that you are a good fit. And again, let's be concise here, be specific, make sure that they leave this conversation remembering your program. And then, of course, pause. Let them react, let them ask questions. They might want to clarify some things, or maybe they're not in a position to say right now. But again, don't put that on them. This is your opportunity, why the grant maker is a good fit from your perspective. And this is an important piece of the talking points if we are thinking that other people in our organization are going to be reaching out for us. They likely have not done the research on the funder, even if it's a funder they are familiar with, even if they have a connection there. This is what is really going to make them, this piece here, if you have it drafted, is really what is going to make them comfortable talking about this potential funding partnership with the grant maker. And then the third piece is to ask them questions. You want them to be thoughtful questions. Another thing that happens frequently, and you'll see we have little stars around thoughtful there. Don't ask them questions that you could easily find on their website or through their FAQs. Sometimes, not always, every funder is different. Some are a little bit more gracious in these interactions than others, but it could potentially make them a little hesitant about you and like building that relationship if you're asking them questions that are right there on the grants guidelines page. It makes it seem like you didn't really do your research and you are just reaching out to them to say, tell us if we should apply or not. If you have looked at the website and their frequently asked questions, and they're a rock star foundation that has answered all of your questions, you know what the funding range is, you know when the deadlines are, If you already have all of that information, there's still some questions that you can ask. Is there a recommended ask amount for first-time applicants? Or you've noticed that they have a rolling deadline, but is there a specific time of year that aligns best with your project and their available funding? We've talked to a foundation before where they said everyone applies for our first quarter application process. By the time we get to the end of the year, we have funding left over and we aren't getting a lot of applications in. Sounds like you should consider submitting your application towards the end of the year if that aligns with when you need the funding as well. But so you can get more than just what is on the website from asking some of these thoughtful questions. And if nothing else, ask them about a recent project or a funding relationship that they are proud of. Give them the chance to humble brag a little bit. And you can use that information to answer for yourself what they are looking for in funding relationships and projects. And that can really help you build your grant application. This, again, is a key piece. If somebody outside of the grant team is doing the relationship building, is doing the stewardship, they might not be familiar with the opportunity. Make sure they know what questions to ask, what questions have already been answered, because they're going to be more comfortable and willing to reach out to them. And here are those talking points. It's a talking points template that we use at D.H. Leonard Consulting and is part of your free handout today. You see all the important information at the top, the introduction, why you think that you're a good fit, and then leave space for some questions. And we've actually seen this done really nicely in some of our organizations. We had a recent round of grant maker talking points that we provided to an organization's senior leadership staff. So not typically, the director of development was in there, so they are a little bit more used to it. But we're talking senior leadership staff with operations and programs, the executive director. They're not often the ones that are reaching out to funders and talking about grants. We sent them the relationship questionnaire. We found several connections between some of these big foundations. This organization is ready to move on to some really large foundations. We think that they're going to be very competitive for some of these opportunities. And they did find some connections. And then those individuals, the staff members on the senior leadership team, were willing to do the outreach because we provided talking points, and it resulted in a few invitations to apply. We are in the process, so I can't brag on them in any funding that has already been secured, but it did happen. And that's a little bit of a textbook example. It's not always going to happen that way, but it can. And providing this information for the members of your team is what is going to make it happen. And so if you don't still feel comfortable, you have these talking points. If they don't still feel comfortable, you have these. They're customized for the funder. And the really important part of how you structure them makes them applicable for a phone call, for an email, for however it is that they want to reach out. And why are we asking you to think outside the box? If you are here as the person in your organization who is responsible in some capacity for grants, why am I asking you to consider engaging your team in relationships? Of course, part of it is because I have been there and I know that you do not have time to do this, all of this. You likely don't have the space to put more on your plate. And I do strongly believe that it should not just fall to that one person. This should be an organizational priority. But beyond that, when just one person is doing the outreach or the stewardship, you're missing out on some of these pieces here. there might already be existing relationships between someone in your organization and the funder that you're approaching. Your leadership staff, your program staff are often going out into the community. They are probably interacting with grant makers in different settings, in different capacities. Are they meeting them at trainings? Are they going to galas and seeing them there? And you're missing an opportunity to interact with a funder and steward that relationship if you aren't preparing those on your team who are out there to be comfortable and willing to talk about these things. Another key piece, and again, why we kind of reserved the whole piece to talk about board member engagement. Oftentimes, if a funder says that they do not accept unsolicited requests, if there is a connection, whether it's a board member, whether it's someone on your staff, if there's a connection, that might be really key to getting the conversation started, to opening a dialogue, and eventually, excuse me, and eventually getting that invitation to apply. Excuse me for a moment. All right, we have these talking points. What else can we do with them? How do we make people feel even more comfortable than just getting these Google Docs that have some information on them? We should have our team practice using the talking points. Different levels of comfortability. Maybe they don't want to do this standing right next to you, but it is something that we do recommend, whether you're the one that's doing the reach out or you're talking to other members on your team who are doing the outreach. Practice what you're going to say out loud. Ask yourself, how would you describe your work as an elevator pitch to a new major donor, to someone that you're talking to at one of those galas or you met at a community event? What do you include in what you already have in those relationship building talking points to help get this message across? And then you can even use this too when you start building the application. You have the talking points specific to that funder. It responds directly to them, why you think your program is a fit, which one of your programs you think is a fit. And then you can make sure that that comes across in your application as well. But it is different seeing it on the paper, reading it, or writing it than it is to actually say it out loud. And our team practiced this a few months ago as part of a learning exercise. And as consultants, we have several clients to choose from. We got 1 minute on the clock and practiced our elevator pitch. Now, I mentioned that when I'm not writing grants or talking about grants, I'm the director of PA Eats, so you'd think I had a little bit of an edge on my colleagues. I got to use an organization that I am extremely familiar with. Not just one of our clients, it's one that I interact with and know the ins and outs of all the time. And it was a lot harder than you think. I have so much knowledge about the organization and the programs that I could probably talk for hours about it. But that is part of the problem. You don't want to talk for hours. You likely do not have hours to talk to them. Even if you are standing in front of them at a gala, they don't want to spend the whole night talking about you, and they probably won't remember you for the right reasons if they do. So you want to think about those main points. What do you want a funder to remember? Whether you're talking to them, whether they are reading your grant application, whether they're reading your email, and you want to make sure that it is specific to them, to a specific audience. It is meant for that grant maker. That is why we recommend the talking points, and you'll see on the template for it, has the specific funder name at the top, why we're talking about how you're a fit for that funder. A lot of times you'll see organizations that have existing elevator pitches or something like that, it's kind of generic, which has its place, absolutely. But if they're going to remember you, they need to say that is an organization that we want to support, that we want to support. So think about talking with that funder and then practice. Say it. Pretend you have 60 minutes, 60 seconds, not 60 minutes, 60 seconds on the clock. Time yourself and see how it feels. We've practiced this exercise, like I said, as a team, but we've also done it in webinars and trainings before. And very often, the first time that you go through this, people say, I was still talking. I was not done in 60 seconds. Or it felt very scripted and very dull when I was talking about it, or very factual. And that is often, if you don't practice, that's how it's going to feel the first time that you are talking to a grant maker. Same with your staff, same with your board. If they don't practice it, it's going to sound very scripted and very flat. And that isn't the impression that you want to leave them with. So get your talking points, have your donor in mind, and practice saying what you need to in 60 seconds. And then practice what you would say in 30 seconds. It's going to feel harder, of course. Maybe if you've already done the 60-second one a couple times, the 30-second one will seem a little bit easier. But it's difficult because you have a lot of knowledge, your staff has a lot of knowledge, and there's a lot that you want to say. You can't say it all at one time. And so practice it and see what it says. And what we often hear after this, maybe you feel a little bit more comfortable with it, but it gives you a lot of insight. And here's the other reason to practice it and really say it out loud. It's going to help you have your passion come across, right? Different words to have words on a page versus saying it out loud. And you hear yourself, and then you can make sure that that passion is coming across, of course, when you're talking, but then you likely are also going to revise that email to make sure that the passion comes across, or revise that grant application to make sure that that is what it is. And that is what is going to land you in the yes pile. That's what's going to make a grant maker want to hear more and engage with you more and talk about a funding relationship. All right, now, as I said, we are going to start talking about specifically more about board members. Diane, we've talked about them a little bit. We've talked about how they are sometimes an untapped resource that people don't always know how to use, and that board members don't always know how to engage. So I've talked a little bit about them, but I know that you have much more to say on the topic.
Always, always, always. And I'm so grateful that we were able to bring Beth's voice to the Native Learning Center today, because her experience, both as the grant professional and as an executive director, so leading an organization, I think it just gives a different perspective for why it is so important in this ever increasing competitive grant space. Relationships matter more now than ever for how you'll stand out. So Beth, thank you so much. We're going to as Beth said, we're going to continue the conversation by thinking about, when we say board members, so our broad, big term as it relates to nonprofit grant-seeking organizations, you might be thinking, well, it's not my board of directors, it's my tribal council, it's my tribal business committee. What I broadly want to think about is the individuals who have a leadership role, but aren't necessarily in the day-to-day with you as it relates to grants. So I want to be really broad as we think about how we're going to engage those leaders in our organization in helping to steward our grant relationships, along how to help build those relationships, increase our competitiveness. Because I heard Beth say, you already have a lot on your plate. And the idea of having to do all the stewardship and the outreach, that can be overwhelming. That can be too much. I agree with Beth wholeheartedly. So what is it that we're really looking for these leaders in your organization and your community to do on your behalf with grant makers? The exercise that Beth just outlined for you, the idea of testing your talking points in 60 seconds and 30 seconds, we're going to put that on the back burner for a moment. It's really good for you to practice and try. We might have some of these leaders think about it as well. We've seen folks do this in boardrooms, in big conference rooms, testing their work together. But let's think about, before we get to that point, that feels a little advanced for some of those board members or tribal council members. They might not be quite ready yet for that idea. So let's think about some initial building steps for how we can start to engage those leaders as a part of our relationship, part of our stewardship efforts. So the first step is I want to have the organization think about who could feel comfortable being, we call them board buddies. That's phrasing that actually comes more broadly from fundraising, not only grants. So this is not a concept that is unique just to grants. Often it's something that we see with major donors, with individual donors. And so I'm actually wondering if you already have anything like this in your tribal organization, some sort of way that you identify board or council members who are willing to help facilitate any relationships. Could you let me know in the public chat? Y for yes, S for sort of, N for no. Do you have anything like this already in place for other ways you think about fundraising or relationships with those in your community? I'd love to know if you're willing to share. The idea specific to grant makers does sound a little bit different. And the reason is that grant makers, well, they've got some sort of formal application process. It might be a few pages of narrative. It might be a lot of pages of narrative. And so when we talk about the idea that there would be these board buddies, some sort of assigned or volunteered, not necessarily voluntold, hopefully, but if we see that these relationships have been identified, folks get a little nervous. What does that mean for my involvement in the rest of the grant process? So as we're thinking about who we're going to identify for having a board buddy related to a grant maker, we want to be really clear that we're not asking for these individuals to take a role in the grant application work itself. This is about connections. This is about warm introductions. This is about keeping in touch. This is not about trying to influence a grant-making decision. This is not about trying to advocate for a proposal. This is not about character counting and word counting in our application. So being really explicit about what the expectations mean, what this phrase might mean in your organization is an important first step. That way we can, now that there's clarity on what we're going to be asking, start to think about who knows whom. Now when we think about who is it that knows whom, I know from having tried this before, if I ask a group of awesome, well-connected individuals, hey, does anyone know someone at the Sweetgrass Foundation? I'm probably going to get very quiet responses, if any response at all. Most people are just going, who? What? I'm not sure that I do. Now you might say, Diane, the Sweetgrass Foundation, what? I don't know where that is. I don't know who it is. Exactly. Turns out there's actually two foundations, the Sweetgrass Foundation. There's one in the Georgia area, and there's one in far upstate New York. So you might not even be sure which one I'm asking about. But if on the other hand, I listed the 5 or 6 board members related to the Sweetgrass Foundation, it wouldn't matter whether I was talking about the one in Georgia or I was talking about the one in far upstate New York. What people would be reacting to is who are the names on that list related to that particular grant maker? Do I know those names? So the grant maker relationship questionnaire that is part of the relationship guide, Brooke has linked it for you in the public chat today. The relationship questionnaire is to help you have a consistent way to put that list in front of your board members, your tribal council, your tribal business committee, etc. So that you're not asking just, do you know anyone at a particular funder or a particular funding agency or a particular funding department? You're saying, do you know people on this list? Now, what does that really look like? It is super basic. A joke that it's secret sauce, a secret idea. No, far from it. We give it to you as part of the session. People can download it for free on our website. This is not secret stuff. We want to make sure that everyone has this idea, has this potential structure to use. Now, you might make it look like your own. Totally fine. Happy to have you do that. But the basic components are, what is the funder's name? Whether it's a federal agency, a state agency, a city or county department, or a private foundation. We want to put the name of the group we're thinking about, list those that we're looking for a connection to, and then we're asking our awesome leaders, do you know anyone on this list? By having the same structure each and every time, what we're doing is helping everyone to feel comfortable with what question are they being asked, what might they respond, what's an appropriate response. An appropriate response, if it's no, that's great. Please let us know. We'd be happy to hear the no so that we know you don't have a connection. If we hear the yes, the follow-up question we should have on our form or in our email is how? How do you know them? Because what we're looking for is not to have lots and lots and lots of connections. I mean, that's great, don't get me wrong, but what we want to find are the best connections, the best one or two connections that we can use to try and have warm introductions or to steward a conversation with the grant maker. I don't know about you, but I've been doing this work for a long time. And it used to be that I had one of those Rolodexes on my desk, the kind where you would put business cards in alphabetically, and then, I mean, it was so big it could roll. So you could like flip between the letters. I don't have one of those anymore. Maybe you still do. But I do. I love old school. So the idea of like flipping through it and picking up the phone to call people, oh, such nostalgia. But what do we have now? At least I know what I have now. Took a while to get all those business cards matched up to it. But LinkedIn is my digital Rolodex. Flipping through, who do I know? How many of you are on LinkedIn? Can you let me know in the public chat, please? I'm going to put delineator in that public chat. Y for yes, N for no. Do you have an individual LinkedIn account? If you're not already connected to me there, give me a wave. Say hi. Happy to connect if you want. Okay. Oh, I thought so. Okay. So not necessarily everybody, but lots of you have that same digital Rolodex. So do many of your leaders, your board members, or your tribal council members, your tribal business committee members. They also, for the same reason that probably the business cards were falling out of the Rolodex, they probably also have something digital like that. What's really cool about LinkedIn for how we can think about board connections to grant makers is that I meet a fair number of people traveling around speaking at conferences in the course of the year. I'm really good with remembering names if I see their face in person. But if you ask me a specific name and I have no context, I'm going to have a hard time saying for sure how I know them or where I know them from. And so knowing that that might be something that is difficult for others as well, LinkedIn is magic because now I can type in a name, see who I'm connected to. And for today's conversation purposes, I can see who are my connections connected to. So what your board members, your advisory member, your tribal council, tribal business committee members, what they might be able to do is to type a name in from the list of 4 or 5 that you've asked about, if they're active on LinkedIn, if they've got a strong network, and find out who knows whom. I joke that it's like the 6 degrees of Kevin Bacon. We're trying to find out how quickly we can make the connections to get to a grant maker. Usually it doesn't take 6 degrees with a grant maker. So on the screen, what I have is an image, grabbed it when I went onto LinkedIn. What I wanted to show was how anyone can see their connection to a grant maker. And in this example, what I wanted to find was a connection to the president at the Annie E. Casey Foundation. They are a foundation that's primarily creating the Kids Count data book and doing funding work for children and youth. They do not accept unsolicited proposals. So they don't want to get a grant application from anyone who's interested. They want to make sure they're getting those that they are interested in. Well, if you're looking for a connection, isn't that great if we can get right to the leader of the organization? And I have not just one, not just 5, I have 42 shared connections with Lisa. That's too many to try and use to get a connection to Lisa. So I would need to look at that list and say, who do I know the best that feels most appropriate in this situation that could try and make a warm introduction on my behalf, on behalf of my organization, with Lisa to see if we could make a connection, maybe get a meeting scheduled. That is the idea behind our board buddies, thinking about who do they have in their network, how can they ask for connections on behalf of your tribal organization. So another why for yes and for no question, how many of you have considered this approach specifically with LinkedIn as it relates to trying to build connections with grant makers? If you have, I'm going to be so super excited. I'm going to be throwing some digital gold stars your way. But if you haven't considered it yet, I hope that it's something that you'll think about as a strategy, talking with your colleagues, your leaders, to see who might be willing to use the power of that, basically, right, the algorithms, use the tech to our advantage in LinkedIn. That part feels very logistical, very techy. But what it's doing is making our matchmaking work with our leaders, it's making it easier for them. We want to remove any and all barriers for our leaders to help be relationship builders, to help be stewards for relationships. We want to help remove as many of those barriers as we can. Depending on the strength of the connection that we might find, then those leaders, those individuals, they can think about how they might do email exchanges, or those lovely, like the e-introduction. I'd like to introduce you, awesome colleague who I know from the Rotary, with awesome colleague here who's leading this expansive, awesome project. It's going to take the next 2 years to complete. They can do that great work. And that could be it. That could be the way they're doing their matchmaking. It could be that they're connecting at events out in the community. That could be the way that they're making their introductions, that they're making their matchmaking moments. It could be that they're participating in, maybe you're inviting people on site, bringing them to a program, bringing them into your organization. So there's a lot of options based on the comfort level and engagement opportunities with your board member, with your leader, for how you might use them as a matchmaker, use them in a positive way to strengthen or to build relationships. Now, this feels more like fundraising than it does with grants. Grants, again, we think about word counting, about applications and clicking submit, but I don't want you to forget to document who knows whom, who's done outreach to whom, who's maybe your plan B if plan A for a connection doesn't work out. What sort of conversations were had? What sort of nuances did you learn about their preferences or about their engagement with the grant maker? You want to document all of that just as if they were an individual or major donor. Maybe it's in your grant management software where you're noting it. Maybe it's in your CRM, your constituent relationship management software. Maybe it's in an Excel spreadsheet. Maybe it's in a Word document in a folder for that specific funder. All fine. Tool agnostic on this step. What I really want to emphasize is that if you are taking the time to reach out to your grant makers, again, whether government or foundation, if you're taking the time to do any outreach, to have conversations, email, phone, in person, whether it's you as staff or you collectively as an organization, including your leaders, document what you learn so that that can benefit future conversations. Is your leadership group, your board, your tribal council, are they the only way that you will steward relationships? Absolutely not. Beth was talking about more like the paid staff idea. How do we engage our team, not just the person who's writing the grant in relationships? That's one way we can focus on stewardship, on building relationships. Our board, our leaders, our tribal council, our tribal business committee, that is another way that we can think about building our relationships. Again, because relationships help to make our writing work more competitive. We might learn how to customize our work to be stronger in the process. We might build a relationship, which means they're going to help advocate for us in the process. We've got our staff. We've got our leadership support. Now I want to think about some of the methods, some of the different ways that we can engage with grant makers, regardless of who is doing it. Often, the way I'm going to talk about these methodologies, often they are led by staff, but there's nuances about it that can be leaders and board and tribal council members who might be moving an idea forward or using this methodology in order to connect with the grant maker. What I want to make sure everyone understands is that people are granting to people. Yes, AI, artificial intelligence, does have a role in the way that grants are received and sometimes initially filtered. We are seeing that. We are seeing that especially in the federal government. It is true. However, the final decisions are people granting to people. People that are reading the application, people that are making the decision. So I'd like for you to pretend with me for just a moment that it is the end of your workday. Please don't get me in trouble with any of your colleagues or supervisors. It is, right? It's just a pretend end of the workday. But you've left the desk or you've commuted home and you head to the mailbox. When you open the mailbox, maybe there's a magazine, maybe a bill or two. I'm getting a whole lot of college mail right now for my youngest daughter. So there was like a stack in there yesterday. So there might be some of that. And also, all of us, regardless of what else is in the mail, have a request from a local nonprofit organization. Each of us got a different letter. It's from a nonprofit in our own individual communities, wherever you might be sitting today. And they've asked you for $250. You've never personally given to this organization before. You've never gone to an event for this organization before. You have actually no idea how they ended up with your mailing address. So they could mail you with a real stamp, not even bulk mail, how they could mail you a solicitation request. There is no judgment in your answer here. How many of you open the checkbook or open up the online donation thing and give them the full $250? I'll keep an eye out in the chat box for y'all to say yes. I've asked this question for years, folks just like you in classes when we're talking about relationships. And so I say with certainty that 95% of folks say, no, I'm not donating the full amount. Some say, I might do a little bit of research because it's in my own community and I might give them partial support for what they've asked. Some say, I recycle it right away. Don't even consider it. Some say, I'm looking at who's involved because I'm trying to figure out, is it one of my good friends? And that's why I got solicited. So then I might give like a partial gift if they've asked for funding. But vast majority are, nope, not at all. That's how you feel as an individual when you are solicited in a way that is unexpected, a group you've never heard of, that you weren't expecting to be asked for. And Carmen, you're right. I see your comment in the chat. Lots of that happens at the end of the year. Yep. Year-end annual appeals absolutely fill mailboxes. They also fill inboxes. And then, yeah, throughout the year, right, you might get a few others, but anytime it happens, regardless of time of year, it's jarring to the individual. I want you to think about, what does that feel like for a grant maker? If they receive your application requesting support and they have never heard from you, they are not familiar with you, they're like, who are these folks? What's the good work they're doing? I'm not familiar. It was jarring, and it's going to be harder for them to get really excited and want to say yes and advocate for you in the process. So what do we mean by relationship? I don't want for you to surprise a grant maker with your request. Whenever possible, I want you to have some interaction with them before you apply. What could the some interaction be? It could be being on their public webinar related to their application. It could be that you have emailed their info at account asking a question about the process or about a template. It could be that you had an email exchange with an actual staff, not just the info at, asking a few more detailed questions about eligibility or maybe about budget. Sure, it would be amazing if it was actually on the phone or in person, maybe having a mug of tea, a cup of coffee. It's a wide spectrum for what we mean by relationship when we think about how funder relationships can help us increase our overall success, therefore our overall grant revenue. I am indeed partial to going old school. I love talking to folks on the phone. I like the corded phone here as a little nostalgic image of what it used to feel like to be on the phone in the office. Now there's no cord, so I can wander around while I talk to grant makers. But when I talk about connecting with a grant maker, whether I'm talking about indeed picking up a phone or even emailing a grant maker, I will often hear the concern that folks are worried about bothering grant makers. Why would they want to talk to me? They're busy. They've got lots of things going on. I hear that question so often that I put it right in the deck, just as you see now, so that even if you weren't comfortable typing the question into the chat box, I know a lot of you are thinking this. So let's get that question answered. Why would the grant maker want to talk to you? Whether government or foundation, they want to talk to you because they have a goal that they are trying to achieve. They do not have the ability to achieve the goal. What they have to help achieve the goal, the money. They have the money to help achieve the goal. You are the awesome organization that has the methodology to help them meet that goal. So that's why they should want to talk to you. Now, yes, they don't always have capacity to talk with you, but if they have any preference where they would like to speak with you or they'd like to learn about you, that's why. So you're not bothering them. If they aren't able to answer, it's just like when you're not able to answer. They won't. It might be a few days before they reply to the email, or they might forward it to a colleague who might be able to answer. But if they can't answer, they won't. And they don't get upset about it, and they're not annoyed. They understand that folks are trying to build relationships because it is a competitive advantage in grants. I would like to step back from grants again, though. I'd like to step back to the idea about individuals. Some of these concepts we've talked about today, the idea of the talking points, the idea of the board buddies, we've referenced how they feel very similar to some other fundraising techniques. So for your tribal organization, do you have any individual donors? Some of you may, maybe not all. But if you do, I'm wondering, how is it that you currently express gratitude to individual donors? If you have any ways that you're currently expressing gratitude to individual donors, how you're saying thank you, how you're acknowledging them, if you want to share that in the public chat for me, I'd love to hear. There's no right or wrong answer here. Just curious to know what it is that you might already have in place. The reason I want to think about what you already might have in place as it relates to individual donors is that that might be something that is replicable, something that is scalable to think about grant makers. So if you have, for example, I was recently in a healthcare facility and they had not one of those physical plaque walls. We've seen those in a whole bunch of different facilities. I'm sure you've seen them as well, where there's the engraved plaques that have the names of people who have donated. They're a lot of work to maintain. Got to make sure that you're always updating the information, getting the new ones engraved, putting them up on the wall. What this organization had was they had a digital wall, which, I took all sorts of pictures. It was beautiful. It was such a cool concept. They had all their individual donors there. We had to talk about why grant makers weren't yet included. And once they realized, oh, wait a second, that's not something that's hard for us to do, now the grant makers were also part of the big digital wall of recognition that was easy to update, not expensive. What do you already have? Are you engaging your grant makers in that same way? Are you recognizing them in that same way? Or can you acknowledge them in that same way? Maybe it's about how you acknowledge folks on like a program flyer. You've got a major donor who supported something. Are you doing the same type of things for your grant makers? Again, not a right or wrong answer for how you're expressing gratitude, but if you're doing it for individuals or you're doing it for maybe a corporate donation, try to think about the same thing. How can I use the same technique? How can I use the same process that we already have in place, that we're already spending effort on as an organization? How can I now ensure that it's for grant makers as well? All right, let's see. Carmen has shared that they express gratitude in report recaps. Additionally, if something great happens, they'll send an email to the grant specialist to share whatever the great something was and express gratitude. I am throwing all sorts of gold stars, Carmen. I love it. I love it. Those are great things to do, to engage grant makers, to say thank you, to help them understand the impact that's being created. Even better if what you're doing can go to multiple grant makers at one time, or just be tweaked a tiny little bit so that everybody's feeling the love, everybody's feeling the thank yous. Beth was the first one to say it today. I've already reiterated it once. I'm going to reiterate it again. When you're worried about grants for your tribal organization, you have lots of things on your plate. And there might not be any extra space. But relationship outreach, relationship stewardship, relationship maintenance is what actually helps make your writing work more competitive. We want to carve out a little bit of space. I don't want to build the plate. I don't want to make the plate any bigger. I want to maybe take a little less admin work, or maybe I want to think about how to make my editing a little more efficient or something. I want to carve out a tiny bit of space for that relationship work. And the way to do that is usually to think about your calendar and what is it that you are documenting on your calendar related to relationship outreach. I'm generalizing, but for most professionals, if it's on their calendar as a meeting, as a commitment, that is what is most likely to get done that day. So maybe you make first Friday of the month relationship day, or maybe it's what you love to do on Monday afternoons after lunch. Whatever works for you, putting your stewardship engagement, putting your relationship work on the calendar. And ideally not just on your personal calendar, but on your organizational grant calendar, so that those other colleagues who might be helping with stewardship, with engagement, also can see it, also can think about the actions they should be taking that particular day. One of the ways that those calendared commitments related to stewardship can then maintain your relationships, can help be meaningful, is if you say, I actually don't have a call to make today, I don't have a report I have to make today, but maybe it's a good day to, let's think about those talking points and update a few of them so that, we've got some great new successes that have happened in our project or program. I want to make sure all my board buddies have the most current talking points related to the project or program that they're trying to connect with the grant maker about, or they're trying to connect with the funder about. So the updating of talking points also, to me, counts as relationship, as stewardship work that might be represented on your grant calendar. How often should you be thinking about connecting with the grant maker, whether it's you personally, or your colleagues in your organization, and or your leaders, your board members, your tribal committee members? How often should we be connecting with grant makers? The old consultant answer of it depends. And what does it depend on? It depends on the preference and capacity of the grant maker. Have you ever asked a grant maker what their communication preference is after you receive a grant award? Has anyone asked a grant maker that? Been so direct and so bold as to ask what the grant maker prefers? Go ahead and let me know in the chat if you have. I've got double gold stars for you if you've asked this before. It's absolutely okay to ask because you want to ensure that your grant maker has what they need for their stakeholders. They need to be able to show, to talk about, to brag about the return on investment that's being created by the grants they have funded. And so the more that you have clarity about what they need, the better they are. The more that they shine, the more that it feels like a funding partnership. So it's one thing to understand what the required reports are. We don't need to, I mean, we might have a question about it, but so we don't need to ask more about that if they've given very clear outlines about here's the financial report or here's the programmatic report. But to talk about their preference for other updates, like what Carmen shared, those outreaches, the emails that were about like the extra great something. I love that. But some grant makers might want to receive that as a PDF so they can quick save it into their grantee folder or quick forward it to other staff or quick forward it to their board. We've seen some grant makers that say that they want it in the body of the email, and that's preferred versus an attachment. We've seen some that say, we don't want anything in email, but if you have something awesome, we want you actually to post about it on social media and tag us so that we can reshare it and we can engage with it. Those are all funder preferences. Not right or wrong, but you wouldn't know 99% of the time unless you ask. Now I want you to think about what Carmen had described for the way that they express gratitude is very active. That takes action and effort and thought and planning on Carmen's part. Which is why I was like, yes, gold stars. It's awesome. But don't forget the things that are more passive, the things that are already happening that don't take extra effort or not much extra effort for you. Are you sure all grant makers are getting your newsletter, whether it's mailed or it's digital? Are you sure that they're getting your annual reports? Are you certain that the way that grant makers are being recognized is the consistent way, proper spelling, right dollar category if you've got them separated by dollars, if they're recognized in all the right printed and digital spots that they should be? In my digital example of walking into that lobby, seeing a big digital board, you'd want to make sure that every grant maker is on there and that their name is spelled properly and that they're in the right dollar category for their lifetime grant giving to an organization. Following a grant maker, I'm not saying even interacting, following a grant maker is a passive form of stewardship. It's letting them know that, hey, you're important enough to us that we're paying attention to what you're doing, to what you're talking about. Honestly, newsletters, digital or physical, are passed around grant-making organizations. I know when Beth shared my bio at the beginning of the session, she told you that I was a grant maker at the beginning of my career. I'm still a grant reviewer all the time, no longer on staff at a foundation, but that was something that was always circulated, whether it was something that had been emailed as an attachment or it had come in the mail and was going to be circulated in the inner office mail. Everyone received a copy. It got passed around of every grantee newsletter that came in. So you want to make sure that you're expressing gratitude in them in a consistent way so that the grant maker doesn't go flipping and go, wait, where am I? The more active ways for stewardship, well, we've talked about some of these. If we can think about those updates on the great somethings, whatever the great somethings might be, that is going to take the place. It might happen that you talk to them about it at an event. You might talk to them about it in your actual building. It might be that you do the email, as Carmen explained. It might be that you post about it on social media and tag them. It might be that you write about it. When I gave you that example of heading to your mailbox at the end of the day, I didn't say anything about getting any handwritten note. It is so rare to get one of those these days. They stand out. Those circulate around grantmaker offices faster than newsletters, any sort of handwritten communication. When we think about stewardship, the more grant makers can see your work in action. Ribbon cuttings at a new park, a performance, whether in person or a recording, any time that our grant makers can see the work that is happening, see the impact, see the return on investment, now they have a clearer understanding of what that work is, of who you are, the impact you're creating. So invite them to be really part of your community in whatever way is appropriate, in whatever is accessible and possible for you. Again, it can be in person, great. It can be recordings of things that have happened in person, also great. Try to give them the chance to feel like part of your organization. Social media, I might not personally in my non-business hours want to spend any more time on social media. I'm done by the end of the day. But during the business day, there's all sorts of conversation happening, and your grant makers might feel the same way, or maybe they're on it all the time. You don't know, but if your grant maker is on social media, you want to make sure that you as an organization are engaging with them, are aware of what they're sharing there. They're your partners. You want to be aware of what's there. But more than that, let's pretend you have a grant maker who not only says, like I do, I'm done at the end of the day. I don't want to be on any network. I'm done. But what if they say, actually, we don't have anything? And there are some big foundations that don't have anything. No social media, no presence. You might say, why do I have to care about social media? The reason you might choose to care about social media is just actually like the example here on the screen. This was an organization that was funded by a foundation for multiple years. The organization's name is Save the River. And the foundation that was funding them had zero social media presence, but required all sorts of updates, informal and formal. They had a good stewardship relationship with this organization. But really, what the organization learned is that they controlled the messaging on their social media. And even though the funder wasn't there, by taking the things they put up on their blog or on Twitter, or, well, X now, but it was Twitter at the time of the story, or Instagram, or Facebook, those made amazing snippets that they would share as part of their updates and their reports to the grant maker. And so the grant maker could see the nice things they were saying about them and how they had supported their work. And see how they're holding a thank you sign, these kids on this boat, learning about the environment of the St. Lawrence River. That photo was all over all of their posts. The funder was able to see how many people were reached, to understand the impact that they had created. And that was important because one of their grants was about building new relationships. Building relationships with other donors, building relationships with other grant makers to increase their sustainability. So it actually helped to prove their point of what had happened with the grant. So social media, that's media you control in service of sharing during your reports and your stewardship outreach. It's a whole lot easier than when it had to be the only way you got media was through the press release. And it was about what media outlet would or wouldn't pick it up. So think about it as a powerful media source that can give you content to then use to share as some of those great happenings that Carmen had mentioned in the chat box. The more you know about each grant maker, maybe through staff relationships, maybe through some of those board buddies that we talked about, the more you can think about how we can be personal in our follow-up. It might be a handwritten note. It might be an email with an attachment. What does personal mean to you? It should mean that it's customized to the preferences of the grant maker. Now, my handwriting is atrocious, but still, if I know a grant maker is going to open the card where we said thank you and gave a quick update, better believe it, I'm going to write as slowly and as carefully as I can to make sure that it's there, or to get the executive director or the vice president of programs, whoever it is, to write something powerful that we could share with the grant maker. If I know that the grant maker, when I went to their office to visit them at a forum that they were hosting, if I saw grantee artwork all over the wall, the personal approach might be that I'm going to ask our participants to make them something so that I can share. What is it that's unique to the grant maker? What do I know about them? What have we been documenting as we've been learning about them in the last few weeks or the months or the years, so that our connections with them are unique to who they are. Think about them as partners. Now, our team, we can talk about relationships all day about relationships with grant makers, but you don't have all day. You have other grant work that you have to do, and our time is just coming to a close here. So I want to give you the opportunity, if you have any questions, please go ahead and type them into the public chat. I'm absolutely happy to answer them right now. But I also want to make sure that you have my email address so that if you have a question after today, you can reach out. It's Diane@dhleonardconsulting.com. If you say, Diane, my preference is nothing else in my inbox, please, we got you covered. Understood. Feel free to reach out on social media wherever you are. You can send us a direct message, and we're happy to answer questions there if that would be preferred. I get it. I know what inboxes can feel like these days. So I'll keep an eye on that public chat in case there are any questions that come up now. Appreciated all of your participation in today's session, both as Beth was sharing some of her expertise and experience, as well as in the portion that I was sharing with you. But I'm really excited to hear about how your emphasis on stewardship and relationship building with grant makers, how that can help increase your competitiveness, therefore your grant revenue for your tribal organization. So again, please feel free to reach out if you have questions as you're putting some of that into place. And thanks for being with us today. Really appreciate your time.
All right. Thank you so much for that presentation, Diane. That was really awesome to see you and Beth go together. A lot of really helpful stuff in there. If you guys want to show Diane and Beth some love, I have included the link to today's webinar feedback survey. That's already for you in the chat. Takes like maybe 2 to 3 minutes to complete. Lets us know what's working, what we can improve upon, and we do share the feedback with our instructors. There's even a spot on there where you can let us know future webinar topics you'd like us to explore. And it's a completely anonymous survey, so you don't have to fret about your name or your email being connected to anything. I just see the answers as they are. There's no names or anything attached to them. So we'd really appreciate it if you completed that for us. We hope you can join us for our next webinar. This is actually going to be a series next week. There's going to be 5 days of the executive director training. So that's going to start on Monday and run through Friday. It'll be the same time, same place every day. So 2 p.m. Eastern, 1 p.m. Central, 12 p.m. Mountain, 11 a.m. Pacific, and 10 a.m. in Alaska. And now that you are on the learning platform, you will not have to individually register for this. All you're going to do when the time comes for the webinar to come on, at the show times that are listed on the slide, you'll just log into the platform like you did today, and you'll see a green banner at the top of the screen, and it'll say Executive Director, Day 1 live webinar. We hope that you can come and join us. You can find the recording to this webinar as well as our other recorded webinars. They have now moved to our Cathedra Webinars archive that's on our YouTube channel. There is a link for that in the shared notes, and I am actually putting that into the chat right now. I'm also putting a link that you can bookmark so that you can log into the learning platform easier in the future. But feel free to check out our other upcoming training events. We always post about them on our social media. We're on Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, Twitter. If you are a podcast listener, we have an in-house produced podcast, the Hope of Thinking Native American podcast. You can listen to that wherever you listen to your podcasts. And if you're somebody like me, where you actually like to watch the videos of people interviewing, then you can check out the videos of our special guests, and that is posted to our YouTube channel as well. There's a whole playlist called Hope of Thinking Native American podcast. We have like almost 200 episodes. We're at like, I want to say 170 right now. So there is a lot to go through, all different topics related to tribal housing, all different lengths. Some of them are like 20 minutes, some of them are like 2.5 hours. So whatever strikes your fancy, you can find something on there. But that's all we have for you today. I hope that everybody enjoyed the webinar. Again, we recognize that you could spend your afternoon, your morning, anywhere, and we really appreciate that you chose to spend it with us working on your professional development and your grant writing skills. But we are going to go ahead and say goodbye. We hope to connect with you really soon. I'm going to go ahead and leave the chat open as well as the meeting so that everyone has access to those links. But I am going to go ahead and turn off the recording now. But thank you so much, Diane. That was fantastic.